Shakespeare's use of soliloquy is a brilliant manoeuvre for getting the audience behind the character. It's saying to the audience, hey, guys, I'm going to tell you something that nobody else in the play knows. So it gives the audience an extra bond with the character. The audience love being taken into a character's confidence. Who might be your mother, that you insult, exult, and all at once over the wretched? What, though you have no beauty, as by my faith I see no more in you than without candle may go dark to bed? Must you therefore be proud and pitiless?
Shakespeare's monologues and soliloquies yield some of his most famous passages. We've already heard some monologues, which are usually spoken directly to other characters on stage, such as Brutus and Antony's funeral orations in Julius Caesar. We've also heard bits of soliloquies in this course. A soliloquy is simply a monologue spoken by a character who's alone on stage and not overheard by other characters in the play. In this lesson, we'll focus on how Shakespeare's soliloquies work, what different functions they can serve, and how actors approach them. Shakespeare's use of soliloquy gives the audience a unique kind of access to his main characters. In most realistic modern plays, the characters stay in their own zone and the audience stays in theirs, with characters almost never breaking the imaginary fourth wall of the set, the one between the actors and the audience. In these realistic plays, the audience relies on dialogue between characters to inform us of the characters' intentions, needs, and fears. But Shakespeare often grants the audience access to the inner workings of a character's mind when they turn out to the audience and begin to address us directly. I should also note that not every director makes the choice to have the actors talk directly to the audience when they perform a soliloquy. In some productions, the characters appear to be talking to themselves, placing the audience in the position of eavesdropper, witnessing a private onstage moment for the character. Every production and stage space is different, but as a director, I find that there's rarely a compelling reason to leave the audience out of the equation when a soliloquy is spoken. When delivered directly to the audience becomes part of the character's actions and decisions and takes on a role in the world of the play. I would argue that the typical modern audience member at a Shakespeare play likely has a slightly shorter attention span than an Elizabethan audience's due to a variety of technological and social factors. The quick cuts and jumps between scenes that we're now used to promotes a habit of consuming shorter bursts of information. None of this was true for an Elizabethan audience, and that contrast is heightened by the fact that many of those audiences were used to going to plays regularly, even weekly. So watching 2 to 3 hour-long plays in one sitting was a matter of course. Not so for most modern audience members, who might go to the theater much less frequently. Taking these social changes into consideration, I find the soliloquy a vitally useful tool for audience engagement during a play. It's much harder for a modern audience member to disengage and check their phone in Act 3 of a long play if they know they might be called upon by a character on stage who needs their help in resolving a dilemma or crisis. And finally, we know that actors spoke directly to the audience when the plays were performed in Shakespeare's lifetime because of written audience accounts and the fact that the plays were performed in daylight with some audience members leaning right up against the edge of the stage, so that the audience and the actors were practically touching each other. So honoring that tradition and Shakespeare's original intention instinctively feels like a useful thing to do in most modern settings. In an earlier lesson, we heard Romeo talking about Juliet when she wasn't listening because she didn't know he was there. When Cam explored that speech beginning, "But soft, what light through yonder window breaks," we watched Romeo test out what he wanted to say to Juliet on the audience. We could even think of it as if his objective in that soliloquy is to gain the courage to speak directly to Juliet. That was a specific decision on my part, not only to give you direct access to Romeo, but also because giving Romeo someone to talk to helps out the actor, who uses the audience as his silent scene partner, rather than having to imagine that he's talking to himself. And in Hamlet's very famous to be or not to be speech, we heard Hamlet wonder aloud to the audience what happens after death and whether he should decide to die and find out, or take up arms and avenge his father's death instead. If we let Hamlet talk directly to the audience and use them as a sounding board for decision-making, we feel more invested in the decision Hamlet will make. Brooke and Cam and I spent some time in the rehearsal room exploring a couple of other soliloquies. First, we worked on a lament spoken by broken-hearted Ophelia. In this soliloquy, she's commenting on what just transpired between her and Hamlet in the scene that happens right beforehand. In that scene, Ophelia has been sent by her father to give back the love letters Hamlet had given her. It doesn't go well. Hamlet ends up saying that he never loved her, accuses her of dishonesty, and tells her that she would be better off spending her life in a nunnery than with him to avoid being a breeder of sinners. He exits at the end of their argument, and Ophelia is left alone on stage. Let's talk a little bit about the context of the soliloquy. So she's just had a difficult scene with Hamlet, right?
Yeah, and he's basically, well, they're spying on Hamlet, and which she knows that her father and others are watching. And Hamlet realizes in the middle of it that they're being listened to. And there's this moment where he's like, where's your father? Are we being listened to? And she could have either said where he really was, or she could lie.
Yeah.
And in the play, like when she chooses in that moment to lie, it's everything changes from there. And Hamlet's like done. And I think that's important for me just because in doing it, there's two ways that I would think about it. And one is she's contending with the guilt of having contributed to his madness, maybe, potentially. Mm-hmm. Or it's just such a shock that he treated her the way he just did, because he then, tells her, go to a nunnery, go be cursed, lies that he ever loved her at all, which is devastating in its own right. So it's either, or both, that like this person is just totally spurned, rejected, and left her for nothing. But also she contributed to that by having them spy on him and lying about it.
I think she felt backed into a corner by her father, right?
Yeah.
That this is what she was told to do, and for a young woman at this time,
there's not a lot of choices.
There aren't a lot of choices, and so she's following instructions.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to think that because she's been with Hamlet, right, and because he's the prince, and because it was assumed that they would be married, right, that was what she thought the whole future was going to look like.
Yeah.
And now that his father's been killed and he's gone off the deep end, she doesn't have any of that security anymore. She doesn't have any of the things that she thought she would have, any of the path forward at court that she thought she would have.
Yeah.
I also think it written into the language is just how much she loved and admired him, right? And that to see him so undone is actually maybe most of what's painting her in the piece.
Yeah, for me, I think that's where like the guilt comes in of like, not that it's all the way her fault or that she even thinks that, but just the idea of this downfall of this person that she loves is horrible to watch.
I think it's a hard speech to take out of context without the weight of the whole play up to this point behind you. And so for today's purposes, you don't have to get all the way to the 10, right?
Okay.
We're just gonna work it through and make sure you have a path that feels like it will get you there by the time we're ready for performance. Cool. You wanna give it a read?
Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword, the expectancy and rose of the fair state, the glass of fashion and the mold of form, the observed of all observers quite down. And I, of ladies most deject and wretched that sucked the honey of his music vows, now see that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh. That unmatched form and feature of blown youth, blasted with ecstasy. Oh, woe is me to have seen what I have seen, see what I see.
Good. It's a fairly short piece, right? And it's full of lists. So I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, it's hard to slow down.
Yeah, well, I do think you're right. There's a momentum to it, right? Because it's such a lament that maybe there's a build all the way to the end, all the way to an end stop, and then she turns it on herself, and I, of ladies most deject and wretched. So let's just talk about the list in that first thought. What's the logic of it?
The courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword.
Right.
So the what does the courtier look? He's what they look to be. What does the soldier want to be? His oh, do I have that wrong? His courtiers, soldiers, scholars, eye, tongue, sword. No, that's right.
I think so. Yeah.
But basically, it's saying like he's the model that other people follow.
Yeah.
He's the thing. Like if I'm the person speaking, he's the tongue. If I'm looking to look like something, he's the eye. I would like that.
That he's a courtier, a scholar, and a soldier, right? He has all of the qualities you look for in the finest person.
Right. Oh, and that those are the qualities that are now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the expectancy and rose of the fair state.
And what does that mean?
He's the person that should be king. Like he's the expectancy of this whole kingdom.
Yeah. So it's not like a commoner is having these problems.
No,
it's like
he's the rose of the whole kingdom.
So what you just did, rose of the fair state, right?
Yeah.
You can imbue the words with the size that will let us know the size of his stature at court.
And then, actually, I think this is what I was saying earlier, the glass of fashion and the mold of form. Like, he's the very mirror, the glass of fashion, and the mold that forms are set by.
Great.
And then the observed of all observers, he's the person that everyone is looking at.
Yeah.
Quite. And like, I don't know, for me, she has all this beautiful language, and then she says something so simple, quite down.
Yeah, I'm struck by that too.
There's nothing to say except it's just...
Because all of that wonder is now ruined.
Just dropped.
It's now brought to nothing. Good.
Yeah.
Great. So that's the first full thought. And I think that alone makes it structurally challenging.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's this and this and this and this and this and this and this led to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You want to put it on its feet?
Sure. Let's see. I'm gonna hold this
Easy little speech.
Yeah,
easy little speech.
It's simple. Ooh, yeah. Oh, what a noble mind is here o'erthrown. Courtiers, scholars, soldiers, eye, tongue, sword, the glass of fashion, the mold of form, the observed of all observers, quite down. And I, of ladies most deject and wretched that sucked the music of his honey vows, now see that reason, that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled, out of tune and harsh. That unmatched form and feature of blown youth, blasted with ecstasy. Oh, woe is me to have seen what I have seen, see what I see.
So, although Ophelia is alone on stage when she speaks, you can see that one way for the actor to think about this speech is that Ophelia needs a confidant and uses this time alone with the audience to work through her thoughts about what has just happened. Even when there's no other actor on stage with them, every actor must figure out why the character is saying what they're saying. They have to ask what motivates their character to speak aloud and what they gain by speaking. So as I mentioned earlier, if the actor is speaking a soliloquy, the audience can become their scene partner and help motivate the need for the character to speak aloud. Does it make you have the urge to do anything particular physically?
It's hard to do it standing.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like, it feels like almost like the first moment even is like...
Great, why don't we try that? That's my impulse too,
Yeah.
is that maybe she's standing when he leaves the room and that this is can't even stay on my feet any longer. Yeah, and that might help. It's probably worth talking about too, this idea that women, right, who were so heavily corseted at the time, may not have been able to catch a deep breath.
Yeah.
And so this idea that we hear, this stereotype of women getting the vapors, right, and feeling faint when they're under duress, may well have been because they were so laced in, right, that as soon as they got upset, when you would go to take a deep breath, they would hyperventilate because they would only be able to breathe from here. And so the costume may actually eventually help you with that feeling of lightheadedness and needing to find solid earth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Great.
Okay.
Cool.
What a noble mind is here o'erthrown. The courtiers, scholars, soldiers, eye, tongue, sword. The glass of fashion, the mold of form, the observed of all observers, quite down. And I, ladies most deject and wretched that sucked the music of his honey vows. Now see, that noble and most sovereign reason, like sweet bells jangled out of tune and harsh. That unmatched form and feature of blown youth blasted with ecstasy. Oh, who is me to have seen what I've seen? To see what I see.
Lovely. How'd that feel?
Matter, I'm still missing words, but
yeah,
it's okay.
I think you're flipping honey and music.
Yeah, to suck the honey of his music vows.
Yeah, you'll find it.
Yeah.
Sucking the honey is such a gorgeous image, right?
Sucked the honey of his music
Because we
vows.
instantly all know what that sweetness is about.
Right, yeah.
In rehearsal, we also have Brooke saying most of that speech from the floor, as if Ophelia is just too exhausted to stay on her feet. The language of the soliloquy itself leads us to this decision, since Ophelia's verse is a bit jagged and doesn't quite stay within the bounds of the iambic pentameter, almost as if she's gasping for breath or too distraught to stay within the expected verse form. This choice is also useful because it helps the audience see how destroyed Ophelia has been by her encounter with Hamlet. Brooke is able to make it feel natural and spontaneous that she sinks to the floor to speak. And this ability is a skill that actors can gain when working on Shakespeare. Shakespearean characters often fight duels, pray to the gods, and make other extreme physical choices. And it's up to the actor to justify those choices and make them feel easy and natural. Next, we'll see Cam working on a soliloquy from The Two Gentlemen of Verona, which has a very different tone and style to it than Ophelia's lament. Proteus is also a character with a big problem, of a very different kind than Ophelia's. He has fallen in love with his best friend's girl. Okay, Proteus.
Yeah.
Two Gentlemen of Verona. Shall we just read it through for language and just the logic of his argument?
Gotcha.
Cool.
Even as one heat another heat expels, or as one nail by strength drives out another, so the remembrance of my former love is by a newer object quite forgotten. Is it mine or Valentine's praise? Her true perfection or my false transgression that makes me reasonless to reason thus? She is fair, and so is Julia that I love, that I did love, for now my love is thawed, which like a waxen image against fire bears no impression of the thing it was. Methinks my zeal to Valentine is cold, and I love him not as I was wont. Oh, but I love his lady too much, and that's the reason I love him so little. How shall I dote on her with more advice, that thus without advice begin to love her? 'Tis but her picture I have yet beheld, and that hath dazzled my reason's light. But when I look on her perfections, there is no reason but I shall be blind. If I can check my erring love, I will. If not, to compass her, I will use my skill.
That's a lot of fun.
It is. It's fun to play with.
It strikes me that You've got a couple of little lists in there, and you've got a fair number of antithetical,
the remembrance, forgotten, is it mine or Valentine's praise, her true perfection or my false transgression, that makes me reasonless to reason thus. I have and that I love him not as I was wont, oh, but I love his lady too much. Right. So there's a lot of...
So you don't love him enough, but you do love her too much.
Exactly.
Yeah. Those contrasts you can play with a little bit.
The one I want to get more clarity for myself on is how shall I dote on her with more advice, that thus without advice begin to love her.
So I think that's an interesting line, right? We've got advice repeated.
Right.
How shall I dote on her with more advice, that thus without advice begins to love her? So how will I dote on her once I have more information? Since now, having just seen her picture and having so little information, I already love her so much.
Yes, I was just, 'tis but her picture I have yet beheld.
Yeah, which is another great absurdity in Shakespeare, that people are able to fall in love with a photograph, right? Or across a crowded room at a party. And I think Shakespeare really buys into the idea that, wham!
Right, I mean, love at first sight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So then the next question, I think, is what do you need from the audience you're telling, right? Since we make the assumption that you're trying to get the audience to help you work out this problem. Right. Since it's a soliloquy. What do you want? Do you want to get them on your team? Do you want them to help you justify your...
I mean, he ultimately ends it with a, look, if I can get myself in order, essentially, I'll do it. Right. But if not, I'm gonna use what I've got to get what I want. And I think that's, he goes through these like layers of, you know, acknowledging he is being absurd, he is being ridiculous, but it's like, ultimately I know what I'm gonna do, right? So I think it's just taking them on that journey with me, trying to convince the audience, but ultimately I know what I'm going to do.
It's such a human thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
That you know you're doing something that maybe people aren't going to approve of, or that maybe is going to hurt your buddy or the other girl involved or whatever.
He acknowledges, exactly. He acknowledges his friend, but it's like, it is what it is, ultimately. And Julia as well. Yeah. Right. That's one thing I do want to make sure I highlight on, is the fact that he already has
a girlfriend.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the two problems in the soliloquy are, it's his friend's girl that he likes. And whoops, I also have a girlfriend who I love. We're used to love, right? Yeah, right. Absolutely. You want to stand and give it a shot?
Yeah.
Okay,
let's do it.
Great.
Even as one heat expels, another... Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's because we're talking.
Yeah. Even as one heat, another heat expels. Or as one nail by strength drives out another, so the remembrance of my former love is by a newer object quite forgotten. Is it mine or Valentine's praise? Her true perfection or my false transgression that makes me reasonless to reason thus? She is fair, and so is Julia, that I love, that I did love, for now my love is thawed, which like a waxen image against fire bears no impression of the thing it was.
Good. That was clearer the first thought. Could you feel the difference? You drove through to get to your core point, which is my love is having the same problem as these other images that I just gave you. It might be useful for just for your imagination to think that you've got Sylvia, the new wonderful love, kind of off to your right, and you got Julia over here, who you're supposed to love, right? So that if you can kind of think, she is fair, and you know, so is she. Oh, but she's even more fair, right? It might help you to get clearer images of both women involved, and it might help the audience also follow your logic a little bit more.
Yeah, gotcha.
Cool.
She is fair, and so is Julia, that I love, that I did love, for now my love is thawed, which like a waxen image against fire bears no impression of the thing it was. Methinks my zeal to Valentine is cold, and that I love him not as much as I was wont. Oh, that I love his lady too much, and that's the reason I love him so little. How shall I dote on her with more advice, that thus without advice begin to love her? 'Tis but her picture I have yet beheld, and that hath dazzled my reason's light. But when I look on her perfections, there is no reason but I shall be blind. If I can check my erring love, I will. If not, if not, to compass her, I'll use my skill. I'll take that back.
Great. I like the struggle that you're finding in there.
Yeah.
I think that moment where you go, I don't even think I like my buddy anymore.
Exactly.
I think that can be a moment of, oh no, he's like my best friend. What am I doing? Well, but it's because I like his lady so much, right? So those moments of discovery, you can continue to clarify a little bit.
I'll take it there.
Great.
Methinks my zeal to Valentine is cold.
You'll notice that Proteus uses this speech and this time alone on stage to talk himself into justifying his current behavior, in spite of what his conscience says. He uses the audience to help him work through the question, whether he should go after his best friend's girl, even though Proteus himself is promised to another woman. He's a little torn about it and pokes fun at himself a bit, but in the end, he gives himself permission to follow his heart. If he talks directly to the audience and asks us for help working through this question, the audience might feel more responsible for seeing him through the rest of the play to its resolution. Let's explore one more soliloquy. In Twelfth Night, Viola has disguised herself as a boy and employed herself to the Duke Orsino, with whom she is immediately smitten. Orsino sends her to woo Olivia in his name. After Viola, calling herself the boy Cesario, visits Olivia, Olivia sends a ring after her, supposedly to return to Orsino. Viola turns to the audience for help, figuring out what is going on. And she has to talk to the audience instead of another character on stage, because the audience is the only one in the theater who knows Viola is really a girl in disguise.
Oh, time. Thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie. Yeah.
Good.
It's a lot.
It is. I think the fun and somewhat challenging thing about this soliloquy is that she has all of these rapid-fire realizations, right? Moments of realization.
Yeah.
And I think as an audience, we love seeing characters caught by surprise or not knowing what to say or having to regroup very quickly and decide on the fly how to respond to stimulus, right?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that gives a true sense of spontaneity, that illusion of spontaneity to our performance. Yeah. So it's often tempting for the actor to come in already having decided things. Right. Characters already decided all these things, right? Because the actor knows what the character's going to say. Right. But in this case, I think it's a great example of a character not knowing. She comes in and says, wait, there's this one thing that's strange, this ring, which sets off a series of realizations, each of which kind of heighten the problem that Viola finds herself in, right?
Yeah. Right until she's just like, like,
I can't solve this.
I actually can't,
Yeah, which is actually one of my favorite lines in Shakespeare. I probably most often quote, "O time, thou must untangle this, not I. 'Tis too hard a knot for me to untie." Yeah. I feel that way frequently. So we've got, I left no ring with her. What means this lady? That's the essential question, right? The thesis question is, what is going on with Olivia? Fortune forbid my outside hath not charmed her. And now she starts to puzzle it out, right? I think she made good view of me is still her trying to figure it out, right? Until we get to, she loves me, sure. I think that is maybe a moment of realization that is the big, oh no, right? Because if that's true, we've got this domino effect of other things that are also true.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Is there any of the language you're wondering about, or do you want to just get on your feet and see about the arc of it?
I don't think so. The line where she says, I see thou art a wickedness wherein the pregnant enemy does much.
Yeah.
Is that the devil?
Oh, that's interesting.
Or is that thou art a wickedness wherein it's like or like a Trojan horse?
Yeah, I think
it's like
that the outside appears to be one thing, right?
It's containing something else.
Yeah, so the outside appears to be one thing, but underneath there's actually this other thing that nobody knows about. I think that's the reference.
Got it. Okay.
I also think an interesting question in the speech is, how much is she laughing at Olivia's folly, right? Because that's the folly she's talking about. How easy is it for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to set their forms, right? All I had to do was put on boys' clothes and Olivia went and fell in love with me.
Yeah.
The degree to which she's really poking fun at Olivia, or the degree to which she can also relate, because she's also in love with someone she's not supposed to be in love with.
Yeah.
So the amount of sympathy, I guess, for Olivia, especially toward the end of the speech, is just an interesting actor question for you. Is she relating to a woman who just is in love with someone she's never going to be able to have?
Yeah. I feel like the text says yes, because she could just lament about herself.
Right.
As I'm a man, my state is desperate to please my master. Like, my job as his servant is to make him happy. And as I'm a woman, oh my God, now she's going to feel how I feel.
Yes,
Like,
right.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, cool.
I also think, because there's all this mistaken identity going on at this point, and we've got a little love triangle going on again, right? In this case, we've got you in love with Orsino, who thinks he's in love with Olivia, who thinks she's in love with you, right?
Yeah.
Not knowing it's you. So we've got this little cycle, and it can get a little bit confusing for the audience, especially because Viola has a twin named Sebastian, who's dressed very similarly to the way Viola is dressed when Viola is dressed as a boy, right? And so the audience can get a little bit confused. And I think logistically, part of what the soliloquy is trying to do is saying, okay, audience, in case you didn't catch what's happened here, right? Here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem. So it's a little recap for us as well.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like having an audience too helps with like the finding of each like new idea.
Yeah.
Just being able to like, and even like seeing women in the audience. I feel like it's like, come on, guys, like, what are we doing? Like,
Yeah,
you know?
great. Well, and a soliloquy is always an opportunity, right, to draw the audience in and go, do you think being human is what I think being human is like? Which is really what I think art is trying to do anyway.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Great. All right, let's put it on its feet.
Okay. I left no ring with her. What means this lady? Fortune forbid my outside have not charmed her. She made good view of me. Indeed, so much that sure methought her eyes had last her tongue, for she did speak in starts distractedly. She loves me, sure. The cunning of her passion invites me in this churlish messenger. None of my lord's ring. Why, he sent her none. I am the man. Oh, if it be so as 'tis, poor lady, she were better love a dream. Disguise, I see thou art a wickedness wherein the pregnant enemy does much. How easy is it for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to set their forms? Alas, our frailty is the cause, not we. For such as we are made of, so we be. How will this fadge? My master loves her dearly, and I, poor monster, fond as much on him, and she, mistaken, seems to dote on me. What will become of this? As I am man, my state is desperate for my master's love. As I am woman, now alas the day, what thriftless sighs shall poor Olivia breathe? Oh, time. Thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie.
Good. How'd you feel?
Probably want to do it again.
Okay, great.
A little just like stumbling over some of it.
Oh, that's all right. Script in hand is always going to feel that way, right?
Yeah.
I think the build is starting to become clear.
Yeah.
I wonder if she did speak and starts distractedly wait a minute, maybe Viola's been doing that around Orsino,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Oh no, it's the love bug, right?
Yes.
So that might be part of the realization that leads you to someone else with a love problem.
Perfect. That helps.
Great.
Cool.
Go
One more
from the
time?
top? Yeah.
Yeah.
So by watching the actors explore these soliloquies, it becomes pretty clear that these speeches are not meant to be spoken into the void, or as a character idly musing to themselves. Actors can engage with these speeches in very active ways that move the characters' thinking forward, and also involve the audience, drawing them further into the story unfolding in front of them. All of the soliloquies we explored and rehearsed today were written in verse, as have been most of the passages we've explored so far in this course. However, it's worth noting that a lot of Shakespeare is written in prose. So in our next lesson, we'll explore how actors approach Shakespearean language that is not written in verse. As we'll see, the change in writing form provides very different ways for actors to approach both the character and the audience.